Hello, my name is Kristy Champagne, and you are listening to Residue, a true crime podcast dedicated to keeping you paranoid. You are listening to episode 45, titled, I Buried My Daughter Twice, Justice for Kristy Harris. A mother always knows the truth. And Patty Brannum is not going to stop until she can make sure that her daughter is resting in peace. It is October 12th, 1994, in Union Township, Ohio. 20-year-old Don Mills and his fiancée, 19-year-old Kristy Harris, are going to go out on the town and just have a fun little night out. The two are young parents to a daughter named Destiny. The two young parents were living with Don's mother, Millie Mills, so she offered to babysit Destiny for the night so Don and Kristy could just go out on the town, have some drinks, and just live it up a little bit. Kristy wasn't really a big drinker. Her mother actually said she was the type of drinker who, if she was going to order a drink, she was going to get a really fancy one with an umbrella in it and just kind of sip it for the night. The couple actually ended up staying out a lot later than they planned on. They didn't arrive home until 3 a.m., and when they walked into the house, Millie said that Kristy looked a little tearful and a little stressed out. She said that her son Don went straight to bed and Kristy went into the bathroom, which Millie figured was just Kristy doing her nighttime routine of washing her face, brushing her teeth, and getting ready to go to bed. Millie didn't see Kristy after that, so now Don is asleep, Millie is asleep, and the baby Destiny is fast asleep. Morning would soon come, and usually on a typical morning, Kristy would get up before anyone else in the house and she would get ready for work and leave the house. Don would wake up around 8 a.m., he would get Destiny ready, he would get himself ready for work, and then Don would drive Destiny to daycare. So this morning felt just like any other. Don woke up, he got his baby ready, and he just figured that Kristy was already at work. As he steps outside into his driveway, he just stops in his tracks because Kristy's car is still in the driveway.
911, what's the emergency, please?
Don immediately calls 911 because as he's looking around the yard trying to piece together why his fiance's car is still in the driveway, he walks towards the backyard and he sees Kristy's body laying in the grass in the backyard. "19-year-old Kristy Harris is laying on her back in the backyard grass. She's wearing a heavy metal t-shirt. The ground is covered in frost. She has a bottle of liquor in her hand. It's a bottle of Bacardi rum. She's got leaves in her hair. Her left leg is bent and up. Her left hand is up and it is closed around the bottle of Bacardi rum. She looks like she is clearly deceased the moment that the police step into the backyard, and officers think that she drank herself to death. It was an immediate response to the way that her body looked on the ground was that this must have been an accident. She must have been so incredibly wasted that she was walking around the backyard and she must have slipped and fallen and just passed out drunk. Officers on the scene are going to immediately determine that this was an accidental death. But once the coroner gets her into the autopsy room, he feels like something is off. There are bruises covering Kristy's body, and there is some dried vomit on the side of her mouth and a huge bruise on her forehead. And one of her fingernails is broken off. So the coroner right away thinks she put up a fight and she put up a struggle. Kristy Harris was the second eldest of 4 children. Kristy had just graduated high school the year prior to her death. She was a cheerleader. She got amazing grades. She was a very smart girl. She loved shopping. She loved hanging out with her friends, and she loved her boyfriend, Don Mills. Kristy met Don Mills at age 16. Don was 1 year older than her. He was this charming, handsome boy, and Kristy fell for him hard and she fell for him fast. Only 8 months after the two started dating, Kristy found out that she was pregnant. Kristy was an amazing mother. She loved Destiny so much. She even put off going to college to be able to raise her daughter. She worked part-time at a local water plant, but she was saving some of that money for college. She was also saving some of that money for her upcoming wedding, which was happening soon. Don and Kristy had finally gotten engaged, and Kristy was over the moon excited for her wedding day. To help save some extra money, Don and Kristy ended up living with Don's mother, Millie Mills, and Millie would help take care of Destiny. Kristy's mother, Patty Brannum, would also help take care of Destiny. Her and her husband did not live very far from the Mills household. But on that morning of October 13th, 1994, Patty Brannum would be at work at Walmart. She would get a call from the front desk telling her that she needed to get down to the customer service desk. There was a police officer waiting to speak with her. Patty's entire world just fell apart. Can you imagine having a police officer show up to your double shift at Walmart to bring this news to you? Of course, she wanted to just get to her daughter. She wanted to see her. And the police officer tells her that she can go to the Claremont County Hospital because Kristy's body is there. Patty says that when she arrived at the hospital and she was able to see her daughter's body, the way she looked was unbelievable. My beautiful daughter did not look like my beautiful daughter. Her hair was dark and leaves and branches were in her hair. Kristy's autopsy would reveal petechial hemorrhages in her eyes. There were blades of grass deep within her airway. There was also vomit. They labeled the cause of death as asphyxia. They also collected blood samples for alcohol testing, but those samples were going to take a couple weeks to come back. There was bruising, possibly caused by falling. They couldn't determine if it was accidental or not, so the manner of death was ruled as undetermined. Kristy's mother, Patty, refused to accept that manner of death is going to be undetermined. Kristy wasn't a drinker. And these crime scene photos, they showed so many bruises. They showed that Kristy put up a fight. Kristy Harris, born February 10th, 1975, died October 13th, 1994, was laid to rest at only 19 years old on October 18th, 1994, 5 days after her death. Her funeral was packed. Don and his mother were there with Destiny, and Patty and her husband were there with their other 3 children. Patty said that she needed to remain strong in front of her family. She could not let her other children see her in this vulnerable position. She needed to hold the family together. And Patty is the type of person that searches for answers. She couldn't let it go. She didn't believe that her daughter drank herself to death. One week after Kristy's death, the family calls a local news station. Patty called Channel 12, which was CBS at the time, and they told a local crime reporter, Deborah Dixon, that they didn't feel like things were adding up. They told Deborah Dixon that Kristy definitely did not die in a drunken stupor. Deborah Dixon would actually call an organization that she knew about that was formed in Cincinnati, and that organization called a forensic pathologist out west that was an independent pathologist who was going to now review the coroner's report for the family. Patty's motivation and Patty's doubts now motivate the detectives to go back in and dig deeper into this investigation. Detectives decide to take a second look, and they start canvassing the neighborhood. One of the neighbors says that they saw a man at Kristy's house in the very early morning hours of her death. They said that this man was moving stuff from the house to the car, and they even saw the man take Destiny out of the house and put Destiny into the car. Not sure why we waited a week after the death and the burial to start canvassing the neighborhood, but thankfully, Patty is a badass. Patty also lets the detectives know that Kristy and Don's relationship was not this fairy tale romance, that their relationship was actually quite the roller coaster. Don wanted to be in control all of the time, and they argued about that a lot. He even took the baby once and just left without telling Kristy and wouldn't give Destiny back. 3 months before Kristy died, Kristy tried to leave Don. She was so fed up with his attitude, with the way he tried to control her. They even went to court, and Kristy won full custody of Destiny. She also won child support. You would think that would be the end and Kristy would have moved on, but Don is turning on the charm, and Kristy just wants her family to work. 1 month after she took Don to court and received full custody and child support, Don asked Kristy to marry him. Of course, this makes Patty extremely suspicious. Not only is Patty suspicious of Don, her soon-to-be son-in-law, but she is extremely suspicious of Don's mother, Millie. Patty would say that Millie was, quote, obsessed with that baby. It was almost like Kristy wasn't even the mother anymore. Millie was the mom. With all of this new information, detectives are now going to visit Don, and they ask him about the mysterious man that neighbors said they saw in the driveway that morning. Don immediately admits that he did call his friend. This friend's name was Brian Sebastian. Brian was a guy that worked with Don, and the morning of Kristy's death, Don called Brian and asked if he could come over and help him take Destiny to daycare. Brian said that he agreed. He showed up at Don's house and he got Destiny ready and took her to daycare. The police were focused on Brian for quite a bit, but they ended up hitting a roadblock. Brian was just a friend that came over and helped Don get Destiny to daycare. But Patty still thinks that Don knows more and that Brian did have something to do with this, so Patty keeps pushing. I'm telling you, do not fuck with a mom. Do not. Police might have just hit a roadblock with Don and his friend Brian, but they find out some very vital information from Kristy's aunt. Kristy's aunt comes forward and says that one night she was just hanging out with Kristy and talking to her, and Kristy mentioned that she thought it was really strange that Don and Millie asked her to sign a life insurance policy. Kristy's aunt says that Kristy said to her, "Listen, if anything happens to me, they have a life insurance policy on me." So the detectives are now going to call this insurance adjuster, and they're going to ask him, what exactly was the situation with Kristy getting the life insurance policy? This insurance adjuster tells them that Kristy never actually signed these papers. She was supposed to come in and sign papers, but she didn't do it. And even worse, he says that the day after Kristy died, what do you think happened? Don and Millie came into the insurance agency and they wanted to cash in on their $15,000 policy. Well, these two idiots didn't bank off of that money, but I'm going to tell you something that they did that was even worse than getting a life insurance policy on Kristy and trying to cash it in the next day. What if I told you that the very same morning that Kristy was found murdered in their backyard, Millie went straight to the courthouse and she tried to get custody of Destiny. And not only did she try to get custody that day that Destiny's mother was found dead, but she also tried to make sure that the child support payments would just stop. She called Children's Services and she took steps to not only get custody, but to stop child support payments. It is looking like Don and Millie had quite a busy morning on October 13th, 1994. It is now 1 month after the autopsy, and police are already armed with all of this new information. But now the toxicology reports come back, and it shows that Kristy had a very low level of alcohol in her system. The alcohol could not have impaired her that day. Patty is now going to share these original toxicology results with the independent forensic pathologist that they hired. And this pathologist says this is a homicide. He recommends that Kristy's body should be exhumed. Exhumation is the process of removing a body or cremated remains from the ground, and it can involve disturbing remains within a grave. Exhumations are rare and can be traumatic, expensive, and time-consuming to arrange. To exhume a body, it is usually only allowed in exceptional cases, and Kristy's case was exceptional. The detectives are going to need the permission of Kristy's family, and Kristy's mother says Kristy is not at peace. To exhume is the only way to figure out what happened to my daughter. Six months after her death, on April 1995, a forensics team would gather at the Olive Branch Cemetery to exhume the body of Kristy Harris. Kristy's mother, Patty, said that she would actually work a double shift that day because she needed to take her mind off of what was happening and she didn't want to be anywhere near the cemetery. But Kristy's father was there and he watched every single moment. Kristy's body was transferred to Dayton, Ohio, where an autopsy was going to be performed the very next day. When the pathologist opened the casket, he said that the body was very well preserved. What he found was head trauma, bruising of the scalp, evidence of a torn membrane in her mouth, and he said that this happens when your face is pressed against something, forcing your head into the ground, maybe. There was blades of grass stuck in Kristy's throat, and the only way that this could have possibly happened is if someone held her face down into the ground, suffocating her. At the crime scene, Kristy's knee was also bent and in the air. The forensic pathologist said that this wouldn't have happened if she died in that spot in the backyard. Her leg would have ended up laying flat. So what they figure is that rigor mortis already set in, and then somebody moved Kristy's body to the backyard, and this crime scene was staged. But staged by who? Is this enough evidence for the detectives to bring this to court, to bring this to trial? Then they get another major tip. Don had a girlfriend, and her name was Michelle Gray. And Michelle Gray agreed to speak with investigators. Don started dating Michelle Gray right after he broke up with Kristy during that time period where Kristy took him to court. So he's dating this new girl, Michelle, and in the middle of dating Michelle, he asked Kristy to marry him. And Michelle said, "Fuck this, I'm not with you anymore." Kristy is now living with Don and his mother again, and they're engaged. So, rightfully so, Michelle says, "Yo, I'm out." But Don tells Michelle that she doesn't need to worry because come Saturday, Kristy's not going to be around anymore. Kristy was murdered on Thursday after Don said that to Michelle. Good on Michelle for bringing that to the police. 15 months after Kristy Harris's death, there is now enough evidence to make a case against Don Mills. But there's not enough evidence to make a case against his mother, Millie. Police feel that Millie is just too old and too weak to have set up that scene, and they don't have enough on her. So, Claremont County Grand Jury hears all of this evidence, and they indict Don Mills on aggravated murder manslaughter charges. Don is arrested for the murder of Kristy Harris, but is a jury going to convict him? On September 30th, 1996, Don's murder trial begins. It is important to note that his mother, Millie Mills, was never charged in this case. During the trial, Don was an emotionless, dark, evil man who didn't show any remorse, even when Kristy's mother, Patty, took the stand. When Patty took the stand as a witness, this was the first time that she ever saw pictures of her baby in that backyard, and she lost it. She said to Don in the courtroom, "You threw my daughter away like a piece of trash." On October 4th, 1996, a jury convicted Don Mills of murder and involuntary manslaughter of Kristy Harris. He was sentenced to 15 to life. By 2016, Don Mills had served 20 years in prison, and he was now up for parole for the first time. He was told that he would have to confess. And he did. He told a parole board, "I just went crazy. I accidentally did this." Parole denied. Don will not have another parole hearing until 2025, and Patty will be there to make sure that he remains in jail.
He was talking about how he got scared. And when he says he got scared, I thought, how scared was she? How is this fair to someone to have to relive this? And 20 years, and I'm seeing her be buried. I'm seeing them take her back up. I'm seeing this. I have to relive it again.
After wasting and taking away such a precious mother, such a precious life, Don and Millie Mills did not get to raise Destiny. Destiny was raised by Kristy's mother, Patty. Patty says that what hurt the most is that she had to see her daughter buried twice. She says that Kristy's tombstone reads, "Forever Young." In this case, you can see the lengths that mothers go to protect their children. On one hand, we have Millie Mills doing the most insane, the most deplorable things to help her child. And then on the other hand, we have someone like Patty who isn't going to let the bad guys win. Thank you so much for joining me again this week on Residue. I appreciate all of you so very much. I would absolutely love it if you could join me on Instagram at Residue Podcast or Facebook at Residue, a true crime podcast, TikTok, Residue Podcast. If you had a little time, it would also help me out so much if you could leave a review on Apple or Spotify. If you enjoy the show, leaving a 5-star review not only helps me, but it helps other people find the show so they can enjoy Residue like you all do. I also have stickers that I want to be giving away. If you did leave me a 5-star review, just DM me or email me and let me know. Take a little screenshot of it. I'll send you a gift and a thank you note because you deserve it. Residue is created, hosted, produced, researched, and edited by Chrissy Champagne. That's me. I hope to see you guys again next week, and until then, stay safe and stay paranoid.